Welcome to The Self-Led Woman. This is a podcast about emotional eating, the experiences that shape our relationships with food, and the path back to self-leadership. These conversations go beneath behavior, held with deep respect for the wisdom of the body and the ways it learned to cope, adapt, and survive. And when we can peel back those layers and meet the parts of ourselves that need care, we begin to see that food was never the problem and we can return to who we really are. I'm your host, Megan Darnell. Let's dive right in. So my guest today, I'm very excited to bring her on. Her name's Naz Demirtas, and she's a certified strength coach and Australian sports nutrition and health coach who believes strength training is less about how you look and more about how well you live. Her work centers on functional strength, muscle preservation, and helping women age with confidence, capability, and independence. Naz is based in Malaysia and works with women both in person and online. She has helped over hundreds of women gain their strength, capability, and self-trust to feel good in their bodies for life. Welcome to the podcast, Naz.
Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited for this conversation.
Me too.
Kick us off. If you could just explain, how did you get into your work, and also, what made this really personal for you?
I think the biggest turning point for me, Megan, was falling pregnant because from a very young age, I was that young girl that my only control over my life and my body was dieting down and trying to be my smallest self. Um, and it wasn't until I fell pregnant and started understanding what my body was capable of doing. It was growing a human. And reading about this daily was empowering because I was realizing what my body was able to do. And at this point, I was already weight training, but it wasn't serious. I thought, yeah, I could weight train, but it was cardio at the same time. So I was still trying to be my smallest self and not understanding the true reason behind all of that. And then I was, I gave birth, and then I really started to understand, wow, that was amazing what women can do because men can't do it. So I started educating myself even more and more, and took myself to get educated on being a PT and a nutritionist and all of that, and just trying to understand what our bodies are actually meant to do and how important it is to maintain our muscle mass and ensure that my daughter sees that from me and she doesn't see me always dieting down or even having that conversation at home. And that was my number one thing. I was like, I'm not going to do what my mum did in our household, as much as she did her best to work with the challenges around her at that time. I had a different plan. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I was going to lead my daughter into thinking, and I still am. I'm so proactive with how I talk about exercising. It's always about getting stronger. It's not about being smaller. It's about stronger. Look what mummy can do. This is what I did today, Lena. And I make sure I make point of that. I deadlifted this today. I did this today. And it's never about dieting. It's always about I'm eating this salad because it's healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's just turning around the language and making sure she's not hearing the language that I'm using because I'm affected by something. It's turning the language so she hears what she needs to hear, what health is really about.
Yeah.
And I think that was my turning point, Megan, just growing a human inside of me, understanding what it did for 9 to 10 months. And I chose this personally, but I wanted to give birth naturally, doing a water birth. All of that was so empowering to me because I wanted to read about when you give birth naturally, apparently that's the highest level of oxytocin that you can reach. It's like, wow, if I can do
Back me
this
up.
naturally, if I can do this without any complications, and if God allows this to be done naturally, then why not? Why not push my body and see what it's able to do? Isn't
Yeah.
that the most empowering thing? If you're healthy enough to be able to do that, I think that's so empowering. What our mothers did in villages or in times where they couldn't get to a hospital, to be able to feel that emotion, I think was so sacred to me and I forever cherish. Um, and something I can pass down to as well, that little story of this is
Mm.
what we did. And
Yeah, so empowering. I love that, where that came from.
yeah,
So, something you speak about a lot online, or you have this philosophy as well about training for the body that you'll need at 60.
correct.
Can can you explain what that actually means? Like, what is it that we're actually training for?
So women are already not inclined like men. Our hormone profile is not the same as men. So we can't build muscle the way they do. We don't have high levels of testosterone. Our high levels of estrogen and progesterone make it almost impossible to build muscle like men do. So we have to be training specifically, intelligently, progressive overload, and eating enough protein. So what usually happens is women are focused on dieting. And what happens is the top nutritionists of the world say, there's research on this, when women undereat or men undereat, they are really below their protein intake, right? This naturally happens because we're always cutting down, what can I eat? What can I get by with? And protein is not the priority. So then we undereat protein, we're not making muscle, and it's absolutely hard to then hold on to our muscle because after 30, as women, it just gets harder and harder. There is a statistic after 30, we lose about 3 to 8% of muscle mass each decade. And it's actually scarier once we hit menopause. It's super common that weight gain and that feeling lethargy and all the other symptoms, which is very different for every other woman. But that all comes with, losing muscle. And when
Mhm.
you lose muscle, you lose independence. And it's so important that we hold on to this. And I think that's why I speak into that because every time I read into recent research, and I'm just a nerd like that, I want research. I want to see evidence of what this means for me, especially when I started doing my PT and my coaching around all of that. When I started educating myself around that, I wanted to see evidence on how I did this properly or the form and the technique because I want to make sure that I'm gaining muscle mass as optimally as possible.
Yeah.
So to me, I need that research. I need to be backed by proper research and proper papers. So I say this with so much, importance for all women. They should be strength training. And I read a statistic the other day. I think about 80% of women don't resistance train.
Mm.
Um, and we should be getting on that. We should be getting on that. I think it's so much more important now more than ever.
And I think when women are in say their 30s or 40s, they're not really thinking about it, but it's like the strength training is the stuff that when you're 60, 70, 80 is going to actually allow you to get on and off the toilet seat, to lift your shopping, to, like pick up your grandchildren, like all those little things. We don't think about them when we're like young and
No,
and we can do it, but if you don't do it, like like you'll be suffering later or you'll be in pain. I mean, I see women, out in the street and they're hunched over and they look so weak and frail. And even my mother-in-law, like she sort of doesn't like going out anymore. She's on her own. And, my husband's like, why is she being so dramatic? And I said, no, you have to realize like she's quite vulnerable. But I'm like, when people look weaker as well, they are more vulnerable. But then on the other side of that, I sometimes am in the gym and I'm seeing some woman in her 80s weight training and I'm just like, fuck yes, like that is so
yeah,
inspiring. Like that is going to be me.
yeah,
But like it's so important, right? Like to like keep ourselves, you've got to like that whole saying, you've got to move it or lose it. Like, But to speak to
Absolutely.
that and then also the protein stuff. So could you just speak into like what do you wish women knew about protein, blood sugar, and why their cravings can get so loud when they're depleted?
Because I would say the number one thing was it just protein helps with satiety. It satiates, as well as a high fiber diet, eating lots of vegetables and fruit. And these things are, like I said before, number one thing, even whole grains, number one thing that keep us full. So if we're removing those things, that's when the glucose, blood sugar levels, they change, and that's all different for women. But generally, we all need this. In general, if we speak to majority of the women out there, if you start taking away your protein and high fiber foods, then it's going to play around with your hormones. But on another aspect, I think stress is the biggest key here because when you do start under eating, unfortunately, our stress, our cortisol spikes,
Mhm.
and that's just when everything's just up and down.
Yeah,
Your
yeah,
hormone profile does change, unfortunately.
yeah.
And I
I guess.
can't speak to that enough. I can't speak to that enough because, as much as you'd like to say, don't stress, it's not that easy because we're all living a reality and we've all got problems. And unfortunately, I work with a lot of mums, I work with a lot of women, a lot of mums, and there's a lot of stress there.
Yeah,
And having to, and I'm not saying it's just mums, it's women, and if it's not being parent, it's about juggling a career, it's about partnership, it's about families and your own independence, it's about respecting yourself enough to be making sure that you're giving yourself to these important aspects of your life. So, as much as I can say, don't stress, there's so much that women deal with. And unfortunately, looking after themselves comes last.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
speak into that a lot. Um, but yeah, responding, I've gone off on a tangent, but responding to that question, protein absolutely is so, so important. Especially for maintaining your muscle mass. So, if we're not training intelligently and using protein as a source to then replenish our muscle glycogen stores, then we're just not maintaining our muscle mass as we age, which is incredibly important.
yeah. Which is so true as well. What you like, it affects your blood sugar, it affects your hormones, which affects every function in your body. But
Yeah.
also, like I notice myself, and particularly now I'm in my 40s, I've always been fairly conscious of protein, but I noticed in the last probably 18 months, if I wasn't being really intentional with the protein intake every day, I notice a real difference in my mood. And I'm just a nicer human when I'm eating enough protein. Like it affects everything. And also what you speak to these busy mums that like they're putting everyone else before themselves, like, you know, they are feeling under resourced. And this is so important for us to feel resourced, to have more capacity. Like, but
Yeah,
you know, the lowest hanging fruit is what you're putting in your body.
absolutely. And it's
And
all about capacity.
yeah, if you're starting with that, like you're just going to have more capacity, like you're going to be able to do more, not just like physically, but also like mentally, emotionally. You're going to be able to hold more, you're going to have more patience, like all of the things.
Yes, yes, because I sometimes speak into a very common thing that we have as a human being. It's that 5 o'clock snap where we've worked all day. We've then picked up the kids. They are then asking us what's for dinner, and we've got zero energy for that. So if we're fasting all day, which generally a lot of women still do, and that's okay if that's working for you. But if you start seeing yourself snap and your periods are now all over the place, then that's a big sign that you're not eating enough.
Mm.
And, that's real. That frustration at the end of the day because you're hungry, you've got zero energy, energy is depleted, then there's not enough food or the right types of food that's going into the system.
Mhm. And those fasting things, like, well, I see it in my work, if people are fasting or not eating enough, like that leads to binges, that leads to emotional eating. People are trying to control it, but it actually
Yeah.
just leads to like the opposite effect. And that's what can keep people really stuck in the cycle of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to speak to, like, because you speak about strength and, you know, I guess women changing their focus to not being about all about the aesthetics and how important that is. But what do you see in your work? What changes in a woman when she gets stronger? Like not just physically, but like who do you see her becoming?
She becomes more capable in her belief system. She understands that she doesn't have to now do what the society is telling her to do. She's now living in her own on her own rules, on her own time, and says, "No, I'm going to block that out and I'm going to trust that this is going to work for me because what I've been doing hasn't been working." Let's face it. If it worked, if the dieting world worked, if aesthetics really worked, why can't we maintain that? Why?
100%.
So if you start working towards strength, she sees that she's capable. So not only have we now switched that mindset, she now knows and understands that actually getting stronger is the actual control of her health, right? Gaining muscle and being in control of her nutrition is the actual control. You're losing control when you've given that away, when you stop eating enough for your if you're not eating at your maintenance, you've lost that control because your hormones aren't working properly. You don't have enough energy. You're wondering why you can't get to the gym. You don't have enough energy for output. So it all is intertwined, really, all of that. And it has a domino effect. She starts understanding if I'm eating well and I'm trusting this process, oh, hang on a minute, I've done this for a few weeks, I'm already feeling stronger in myself, and says, come on, Naz, let's go. I'm ready to take on more. And when she says that to me, I'm like, this is it. She's trusted the process, she's getting stronger, and she's loving that feeling of being in control. And when you've got that, you wake up the next day and go, right, I'm ready. Let's do it. What
Yeah.
else can my body do for me? Instead of feeling depleted and accepting that aging is about being fragile, no, we're going to change that. We're going to change that today because that does not mean that. Let's have a look at J Lo. Is she 62? I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
that is something, that's a goal to be working towards. Okay, we may not have the same resources as her, but if she's focusing on strength training and eating well, which she is, and she's said on many podcasts or interviews, then I think that is the number one thing we should be doing. It's just you can be doing your walking, your running, which is fantastic for cardio health. But number one thing that you should be including is your strength training.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you also talk about, like I think I saw a reel on your Instagram and it's like, yeah, aesthetics are cute, but like osteoporosis is not cute. Can you actually speak to that?
I can, and on a few fronts actually. My grandmother is currently in aged care, and you don't understand the reality of osteoporosis until you sit in an aged care like that, in a facility like that, and see that the independence has been taken away because they were not strength training, right? So that muscle has depleted. They don't have the energy to stand for longer than 2 minutes. So they do need assistance when walking or, you know, getting somewhere. They just need assistance for everything. But even that, I do have a couple of clients where their bone density has reduced and they have forever reduced intake of their nutrition for a very long time. So
Mm,
there's two things at play here: their nutrition and not strength training or not exerting enough power. So power work is really effective for bone density. And I see that often. This is a reality that most women need to hear, especially when you're younger. You've got to understand that this happens. When you start dieting for too long, or under eating, I should say, ignoring the work of high protein diets and strength training, what happens is our bone density then drops and muscle mass drops. And when these things go, you lose independence. and you get fragile. Some of my clients, they're in their 60s. I do have a few clients in their 60s, and they have had ACLs, they have had falls, but luckily they've been training with me. They haven't had a hip fracture.
Mm.
And this is so common over 60 women that do fall, they will have a hip fracture. And I think that's a high percentage. 50% of women will have a hip fracture if they fall. And it's not bad luck. If you're holidaying and you're holidaying with your family, and if you trip, which is so, so common, and I bet everyone knows somebody that has fallen on holidays because my mum certainly has. And this is a common thing that happens. So if you trip and you fall, I mean, nobody wants to be in hospital on a holiday
Mm.
or having to replace a hip um, after 60 because there are complications. There are other things that follow with that. And this is why I do speak into that. I mean, some of my things are sort of, my reels are, triggering and sometimes can come across a bit, in your face. But the reality I speak to is, like I said before, I always speak to the latest research and what that tells us. And it could change next week, it could change next month, and I will speak into that as well. I'm the type of woman that will say, "Well, I said this and I was wrong." But right now, this is a real statistic. Um, Bone density is real, and I encourage all women after 40, even 30, if you know that if you've got a family line that can decrease very quickly. So I've got a client that's entered menopause in her early 40s. So it's not about age anymore. Have a look at what your family experienced. Is this genetic? How can I delay the process? This isn't stopping. It's not completely stopping the process. It's delaying the process of muscle loss,
Mm.
of bone density loss, of my independence. I know one day I'm going to get old, but how can I have a good life until I start losing that independence, or I hope I never do, but we don't know. We don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So to speak into like because like these things are so important and like just being strong and like it's not about aesthetics like you always speak about, but what does it look like when you see a woman start to train and eat from a place of love and respect for her body and appreciation?
Yeah, this already sounds so calming to me. Your nervous system regulates. And when your nervous system is calm, she feels safe and seen, the results actually start to happen. Because when she's scared and she's stressed, there's no change that's going to happen. There is no change that comes from a place of hate. You can hate your body all you want and you can diet down as hard as you can, but cortisol's going to rise, other hormone changes are going to happen, and there will be no change. There will be change for about this amount of time and you will flatline, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
know you've seen this in your
I've
field as well.
seen this in my work. I've seen it with myself. Like,
Same.
and this is what the piece that I speak to about emotional eating, like, or people trying to lose weight. And that's like, I don't like to, I guess, speak from that lens because I'm just like, this is your journey. And if that's something you want to do, great. But also, I think there's some people that have, sadly, some very unhealthy relationships. I don't even want to say unhealthy, but like challenging relationships with food and their bodies,
Yeah.
which is fine. That's their journey. But sometimes if they continue to focus on the aesthetics or losing weight, it can actually just further perpetuate shame and things like that. But
Yeah.
I see it like they're pushing themselves or thinking their bodies are something to fix or, not working with what's actually underneath. And it's like the cortisol just is like, what's it going to do? It's going to hang on and it
Yeah.
won't let go. Like,
He won't let go.
it will not let go. Like last year, I wanted to, get in the best shape of my life because I was getting married. Like, I don't think that's an unusual thing. But at the start of the year, nothing was happening. And I was doing, quote unquote, all the right things. And my body just wouldn't shift. And then when I resolved the emotional stuff underneath, and it took a bit of work, But once I could like work with all of that, it came off with ease. But then I'd also healed a lot of other stuff which didn't then make me feel like I needed to emotionally eat, and I could just sit with the emotional stuff. And I think that that's like these two work so hand in hand together. But to speak to, like, because so many women, like, it sounds like in your world, they come to you and they've been under eating or not eating enough
Yeah.
and like feeling like they need to be smaller. Um, so there's those people that like they don't feel like they emotionally eat. It's more about control for them.
Yeah.
But they're in this space, and you probably see this all the time, where they are still thinking about food all day, or it's taking up a lot of space in their mind, or they're doing things like, bargaining, which is like, that constant mental math where you're like, well, I ate this, so I have to work out later, or, oh, I didn't eat that much for lunch, so I can go out for dinner and indulge. And it's just this constant like bargaining and mental maths, or like the body checking, or I'm bloated today, so I'm not going to eat, or all of those things, or having to earn it, or trying to undo it. Like, what do you actually see going on there?
It's absolutely, you're on point there. It's just self-sabotage, isn't it, Megan? Whether I think it always comes down to emotions, it's feeling that I went on a holiday for Christmas and I've come home and I overate. Now I have to make sure that I'm back into exercise. And that whole New Year's resolution, I actually really hate.
Mhm.
I hate that because that tells everyone you've done wrong and you didn't stay on that goal. And now you've got to restrict yourself and be super strict because that's one thing that doesn't work. Stop telling me what to do. Stop telling me that I've got to be super strict because it doesn't work. Allowing people to just have that reset and say, I'm going to do this in my own time. It's okay. My husband's birthday is in a week, in early Jan. I'm going to ease into it and not applying that pressure. The more pressure that we put on ourselves, as human beings, we want to resist. And the older we get, we resist the changes. And it takes a lot for us to say we need to change A, B, C, D. Um, but in terms of, I mean, women can deny all they want, and it's a very sensitive topic, that emotional eating, but it's very common. It is very common, and I do speak to healthy eating and making sure that you're eating, but I do know that a lot of women do give up their meals, and at the end of the night, they will binge and they will eat the kids' leftovers or snacks or a handful here and a handful there. That to me is emotional and binging and super sensitive topic, and you don't confront that until they start talking about it. So all I can do is empower and educate and talk about the importance of all of what I'm trying to teach women, the muscle and the hormones, and it just gets harder and harder as we age. It doesn't get easier. We're not inclined to make muscle. We're just not that way made. We're women. We're meant to make babies. You know, we have a different hormone profile, and that changes as soon as you have a baby. Our gut microbiome changes. If that does not tell you anything, I just, yeah, that should tell you something. If we
Yeah.
have a baby and our gut microbiome changes, then that means a lot of other things change as well.
Absolutely. Gut microbiome affects everything in our bodies. And what you
Yeah.
were speaking to, it's like this is the work that I do. It's like people get stuck in these cycles because they have this part of them that's like, I need to be perfect. I need the New Year's resolution or whatever. And it puts so much pressure on them that they feel the need to be perfect. And then it gets to, say, their husband's birthday, and then they just like, they go so far the other way, either binging or overeating, to the point that they feel really terrible, and like they feel sick or whatever it has gone on. And then they have another part that's shaming them and being like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. You need to be perfect again tomorrow, which creates more pressure, which then just keeps you stuck in the cycle. And because they've probably spent all of last year doing that, they did go on Christmas holiday and indulge because they felt like they'd been deprived all fucking year.
Yes.
And it's like, just allow yourself, if when we can heal this stuff, that's the thing. It's like when that's the thing too. We are raised in a system and in a culture that tells us we need to be small, that tells us we need to, eat less or whatever, or women are getting sent these messages. But it's like when we can actually stop listening to the noise, and often that takes a bit of healing, and just come back to our own bodies and be able to feel into them, be able to
Yeah.
know when we feel hunger and fullness. I can tell you hand on heart, 10 years ago, I didn't even know if I was hungry or full. Like I just didn't have that. I was so disconnected to my own body. I just couldn't feel into that. And I didn't know what I needed when I needed it. And I would stay stuck in those cycles. But it's like when we can actually get rid of the noise, come back to our own bodies. And I think the work you do when people start weight training, that's a lot of the times for a lot of women, the pathway back to their own body, where they
Yeah.
get to reconnect and then go, well, what do I actually need? I actually need
Mm.
to feel my body better today because I'm going to be weight training and I want to feel strong. And, like this is kind of, I guess, the seed that's planted that then starts to change their relationship to their body. It certainly was for me a big part of my journey, like going to weight train and then starting to appreciate my body, not just for what it looked like, but for what it could do. And,
Yeah.
even like this, my ego would just, if I could lift more than the guy next to me in the gym, I was just like, fuck yeah. There's just things like, I think one of your reels, this is hilarious. Naz put a reel up maybe a couple of weeks ago or something, but said, what do we call men under 70 kilos? We call them barbells.
A barbell. Cheeky, but true.
But just that journey of like being able to go, wow, look at what my body can do, look how strong I am, and similar to your experience with pregnancy, but then you were like, where can I take this is amazing. It's like coming back to that, like that real connection to ourselves. Like that's where women find their power, that's where
Yeah.
they connect back to their intuition, that's where like they can really just tune in, because that's our superpower.
Absolutely. And I think you got to a really good point there. I think that whole emotional eating, if it wasn't for diet culture, there would be so much less of the emotional eating. This diet culture has taught us that we need to eat a certain way and look a certain way and be on the latest trend. And that's exactly how all of this emotional eating starts because there is restriction.
Hmm.
You would, agree that once it's restricted, you want it more.
Yeah,
You want
absolutely.
to you want to fight against that.
Mm.
Why can't I eat that? And then undoing that all takes so much work, and you will have lapses. We're not perfect. And then grounding yourself and making sure that you're connected with your body. And that's exactly why I love going to the gym because that is the only time I get to connect with my body aside from my meditation that I do to make sure that I'm grounding and all of that. But when I go to the gym, I'm connecting with my body and my muscles. And now I take that to a different level with my nutrition. I don't want to deprive. I want to nourish. I want to make sure that I'm eating for my muscles, that they're able to make sure that after my training, am I replenishing my energy sources, my muscle sources, all of that, my hormones, eating enough fat, dietary fat. There was one time where I was eating so much less dietary fat because let's face it, it is high in calories and it's so easy to cut out, just like how we cut out carbs. It's just easy, right? But when you cut out dietary fat from your diet, our hormones need that. So that our hormones go wild guessing what we're trying to do. So it goes into survival mode. And guess what? Again, our cortisol increases and all these other changes happen. And then we wonder why we've got belly fat. We wonder why we're so fatigued and we don't have energy because we're not feeding ourselves the right nutrition. And a framework that I work with is the 3 W's: what you're eating, when you're eating, and why. Think about these things. Be mindful. And when I say that to clients, they're like, oh, you're so right, Naz. Why am I eating this? I don't want you to think protein because I need a protein because of ABC. You're eating protein because you want to be able to make sure that you're replenishing your energy after training, but also keeps you full, helps hormones, it helps in many aspects. It's not just for muscle making. It's a powerhouse. We talk about superfoods and all these green juices. Let's talk about
Protein.
protein.
That's a
And I
superfood.
know I get it. A lot of people have heard it. They're like, oh, right, but I can't get that much protein in Naz. But I say, okay, well, are you having a protein shake in the morning? Because I don't want to eat chicken for breakfast either.
Mm.
Oh, no, I'm not doing that. So it's just these little basic little changes that we can do and implement throughout the day. Protein yogurts, protein, whey protein shakes in the morning, simple things, egg whites. And they're not expensive things either. There are things that we can do.
Yeah. One thing for me, I have protein pancakes. I'm one of those people that can eat the same shit every day for like 10 years, or maybe not that long. I get to like maybe 2 years and I'm like, I'm sick of this. But I eat protein pancakes every morning. And I'm big on, because I've had a real history with food where I used to, well, for lack of a better term, eat shit that made me miserable.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, I don't eat anything that makes me miserable. And these protein pancakes, like chocolate protein pancakes, I think they've got like nearly 40 grams of protein in them, but like they're so yummy. And I just eat them and that's been, because for me, it was like when I sort of got into my 40s, I was like, oh, I actually need more protein now. Like I'm not absorbing it.
Mhm.
Or like I'm just, my body's just not responding the way it used to. So it's like lunch and dinner were fine, but like breakfast would struggle. Like people don't know this. They go, I'll have eggs. Two eggs only have 12 grams of protein, not enough.
Not enough.
But just having that, it's just like I get the protein, I feel good, I've got lots of energy. I these have so much protein. Well, they're so filling. I often eat half of them and then I put them back in the fridge and eat the other half later because I'm just like, I'm done. Like they're
Yeah.
so satiating. And then I like get to like 1 o'clock. I'm like, oh, I'd have lunch. But it's like eating that stuff, like just being really intentional. It's really important, not just
Mhm.
going, oh, I probably have enough protein, especially in your 40s, I think. But going,
Yeah.
like I need to be getting these things for, my body. Like protein's the building blocks of all your new cells, muscle generation, everything. Like it
Yeah.
is, that's a superfood.
It is. And you talk about being over a certain age and mm, placing an importance on that. And what I see in my older clients in their 60s, they stop having an appetite for food.
Mm,
So then they say to me, Naz, I'm just not hungry. How do I get that in? And and that's another thing, like making sure getting these habits in now to make sure that it just becomes normal as you age. Because when you get to 60, you're just not as hungry anymore. And that's another normal aging process. We start to not feel as hungry. And so we're not prioritizing protein anymore. It's just like, okay, I'll just have a piece of toast and be done with it. But that just adds to being fragile.
yeah, 100%. So if a woman is listening to this and she's like, okay, like I'm done with the cycle of like punishing myself, or like I want to do this properly, like I actually want to, invest time or whatever into this, what would you give her? Like, say, give her three things that she should focus on that actually matter.
I think if you're starting out and you're done punishing your body, you can even start small, starting at home if you don't have access to a gym. And if you do have a gym, starting slow, because I understand that it's so intimidating going to a gym when you're not sure about what to do. So even doing body weight at home is a fantastic way of regaining and ensuring that you've got control over your body. Body weight exercise is actually very hard. That would be number one. Creating tension through your body, learning movements, and making that almost like you know, a time where you connect with your body. Second, how can I replenish? How can I replenish my energy to make sure that my body's functioning well? Am I getting enough protein? Are my meals connected? So I love to tell my clients, make sure each meal has protein, 30 grams of protein at least, some whole grains, some carbohydrates that are low GI, depending on the time of the day and your training, around your training, and lots of fiber. Get in your vegetables, salads. We just don't eat enough. Fats, healthy fats. Always make sure that there's some healthy fats on your plate as well. And you're going to feel full and energized. And you're going to start waking up with energy. Number two. Number three, focus on your stress and sleep. I can't stress this enough.
Mm,
As
sleep's
much as you can.
Yeah. And one thing I say to some of my clients, because and you would have this too, women are like so busy these days. It's like they're not just raising families, they're also working full time and they're doing all of these different
Yeah.
things. And they're so stretched thin that they feel like they are running around with their hair on fire almost. And, so many people say, oh, just relax, just take a day off, like just have a rest, or, maybe just give that to someone else. And it's like, oh, yeah, like that's so easy. But I just say
Yeah.
to them, because that's too hard for some women and they've been functioning that way for sometimes decades, it's like, that's maybe just too much for them to even think about. And then they think, well, I can't take a day off because then who's going to do it? I say to them, keep doing all the things you're doing. And this is just an internal shift that nobody else is going to notice, but like inside, move half a second slower.
Mm.
And just everything you do gives you that little bit more presence. I gave this advice to a client last year, and then I decided to take that on myself, and it changed everything. It changed my relationship. It changed the way my work was approached, everything, because I was just far more present, far more connected to my body, far more connected to what I needed, and could tell even when I was stressed and go, oh, I actually just need to stop for 5 and go grab a cup of tea or something. But it's like,
Yeah.
that stuff I think is important for lowering our cortisol. Like, we're not designed to be running around like men.
No.
We need to slow down sometimes.
Slow down and connecting with the feminine side, right? Being more mindful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why are we rushing? You're absolutely right. Why am I running around doing this? And I say this to my clients in the gym. They're constantly trying to get to the next exercise, the next set without waiting.
Mm,
They're just on that roll because they're constantly on that mother timeline. I've got to run, she's looking after 4 kids, 3 girls going to school and 1 baby, right? So she's constantly, darling, slow down. Let's slow down, let's rest, breathe. Because we're just so used to being on that let's go, 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 go. But when it comes to ourselves, we don't actually take the time to
yeah, so important.
mindful. And even with food, and I think it's so important to, sometimes, my daughter does it. She's eating like she's just rushing so she can get to the next thing. And I have to remind her, slow it down. Your food is not running away. It's okay. We've got time to eat.
Your food's not going to run off your plate. Yeah, totally. It's so important, but like, and so simple. Like, it's free. Like, slow down
Yes.
just half a second. It's like, I think really good for everything, like the cortisol, the hormones, all the things. Is there any last pieces of wisdom that you'd like to leave the listeners with? Yeah, absolutely. I know, and you see like those people in Italy, like they're nearly 100 and they're like climbing up a mountain every day and like having, like, yeah, just living like they're 60, but they're in their late 90s. It's incredible. Yeah. I think Sicily is one of them, maybe. Is it Sicily? Yeah. Yeah. Mm, absolutely. I think the common thread with all of those blue zones, and I see this all the time, you know, people really what it comes down to is connection. And that's like connection to yourself, to connection to your body, connection to knowing what you need, connection to others. Like these people live in communities where they all rely on each other. And I think that's such a big piece of that, like living to 100 and like, aging in a way that's like compared to people that say are in Australia or whatever, like you'll see these people that are 100 and you're like, are you kidding? You look 60. Like, this is insane. It's so cool. Oh, I have loved this conversation, Naz. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom. You're so welcome. And if the listeners want to find you, where is the best place that they can reach you? Amazing. All right, I'll link your Instagram in the show notes as well so people can just click and follow along and you can see her spicy reels. They're very cool and very cool. Thanks, Naz. No, this podcast is for education and reflection only. It is not a substitute for therapy or healthcare. If this episode brought things up for you and you need support, please reach out to a trained therapy practitioner or health professional in your area. Thank you so much for listening. If this episode resonated, please follow or subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, or share it with someone who might benefit from hearing it. You can also connect with me on Instagram at Megan Darnell Therapy. If you share the episode or want to let me know what landed for you, you're always welcome to message or tag me. I love hearing from you guys. Until next time, I'm Megan Darnell, and this is The Self-Led Woman.